This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all!
See how the trouble you've started?
Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers.
You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello and welcome to Whistleblower Nation here on Revolution Radio. I am your host, Stella Free. I always start with this. What is a whistleblower? A whistleblower is a person who makes public disclosures of wrongdoing, corruption, and crime. These courageous people often suffer retaliatory actions because of their disclosures. Well, I'm here to celebrate these people and give them a platform to speak, because shining a light on wrongdoing, wherever it occurs, plays an important role in keeping society peaceful, free, and just. So if things work out well, we'll have David Voigts back. Unfortunately, last time I tried to have him on, there was some technical issues as well, but this time maybe we'll have a little more luck. And if that doesn't work out, my dear friend and an expert in some of the human experimentation areas, his name is Dr. Matthew Aaron, will be joining us, and maybe the three of us will be speaking. So we'll just see how it goes. So I guess we're going to try and get David in on the call.
All right, we're live on air again, Ella. And do we actually have Matthew?
We have Matthew.
I love you all. Okay, your show is on. Here we go.
Hey, Matthew.
Hello.
Hi. So we were, again, trying to have David Voigts, and you and I both know he has a wonderful presentation and has great information to share with people on the topics of human-machine interfacing and brain-influencing technology and some of the experimentational programs that go on. And, he worked at the Navy, and I don't know how we're going to get him on board. We're having so many, this is like the second time. So anyways, but we can talk about similar topics because I know you're a specialist in these areas.
By being a victim of crimes involving similar things, that makes me a specialist?
Well, your ability to research and become involved in getting immersed in these topics for it to have a better understanding and have the verbiage and the ability to communicate effectively with people. I think you're in the top 4 activists in the community of people that feel like they're being experimented on or targeted or harassed by certain corporations or entities for different various capacities and capabilities. So you're right up there in my book.
Is that an equal playing field in the top 4, or can you give me a rank?
Number 2. You might be number 1.
I'll take that. I'll take number 2.
But number 1, for personal reasons, you're just a wonderful, amazing human being. So you're really number 1. So, but I had to give an unbiased opinion. We have some other people. I thought, well, there might be somebody else that might deserve it, but Anyways.
I was looking forward to talking to David because I had a bunch of ideas for his campaign to walk across the country and bring awareness to this. I was excited about a bunch of ideas and stuff. I was really hoping to talk to him. I've never spoken to him before.
I know. I don't know if we'll be able to get him to connect or not. I mean, she could try one more time, but I don't know. It might screw everything up. What's your thoughts, Mona?
Well, we had this miracle happen.
Be happy for this?
I think for right now, yes.
Okay. Yeah, so David has gone through great lengths to try to educate the community after being a part of the academy and discovering that there's some experimentation programs similar to the Tuskegee experiments in the 60s, I believe. You probably know about that, Mona. She may have stepped away. And so...
just mute because this is not my show.
Okay.
I'd like to hear what Matthew's up to and what's going on with him, because you were boasting about how big his brain was. Pick his brain for a little bit.
I will pick his brain, but I thought maybe you knew about the Tuskegee experiment. So anyway, this gentleman, David, is he's tried, he's already walked halfway across America once already, and very successfully, and was able to obtain a lot of press and try to bring these matters to light. And, it's kind of shocking. People don't want to think that their government would be doing something so horrendous, and it's kind of similar. I would take to being on a terrorist watch list. Kind of gives them some leadway into surveilling people and trying different tactics that might work in true terroristic environments. So, what do you think, Matthew?
Have you defined for your callers for your listeners, what we're talking about? Because I wasn't able to listen for the last 10 minutes or so.
All I've been doing is reading. We spent quite a bit of time reaching David, and then we also kept losing the studio.
Oh, I think Dave just joined.
Yes.
Dave? Oh my gosh, it's a miracle. Thank
God.
God.
Man, we're gonna have a bowl.
Oh my goodness, I'm gonna have a celebration here. I'm so glad you could join us, Dave.
Yeah, glad to finally make it through.
Yeah, me too. Okay, so I'm gonna read a little bit about Dave. Okay, so I have his bio in front of me. David Voigts is a former naval officer and graduate of the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. He earned a degree in Control Systems Engineering. David worked as a surface warfare officer in electronic warfare and nuclear engineering jobs. While in the service, David learned of an ongoing non-consensual human experiment testing on human-machine interface weapons. The program is testing technologies similar to those used in modern prosthetics. A similar program was revealed in the 70s, where a government agency was caught dosing unsuspecting citizens with LSD. The agency never told the human subjects they were in an experiment or checked to see if there were long-term side effects on their lives. That agency was brought before the Congress in the 70s. And that's the church hearings, which I was just talking about earlier when I was discussing some whistleblowers. Since then, many ethical reforms and training have been put in place at the Naval Academy. There's a substantial character development program. All go through ethics and moral philosophy classes, and there are classes in naval law. The humanities courses include discussions of the Soviet Gulag system, and trainees visit the Holocaust Museum and listen to Holocaust survivors speak. The Tuskegee experiment and atomic radiation experiments are discussed. All in there. There's an extensive effort to ensure that new officers have a strong moral compass. So upon learning that these current non-consensual testings were existing, David began to do outreach campaigns for the victims, and David has been doing this now for a couple of years. And he will again be walking across America starting this spring. So David, thank you again so much for coming in, and I'll try to speak a little quicker since we have a little bit less time. So maybe you can start with what year you were working as a system warfare officer, and what did that entail, and what year was that?
Okay, so I joined the Navy in '97, enlisted and went through the nuclear power program, and then went out to the fleet, served on a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, and applied to the Naval Academy. I was picked up for the Naval Academy in 2000, and I went to the Academy from 2001 to 2005 and earned a degree in Control Systems Engineering. And then I became what's called a surface warfare officer. So essentially you're the guy that drives surface ships. You take care of all the administrative work. You're a division officer for a specific warfare area in your initial tour. And during that initial tour, I served as an electronics warfare officer, and I also was a bridge officer and served in the operations department. And then I went through the nuclear power program again in Charleston, South Carolina, and then served on the John C. Stennis, which is a Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. And I served as a watchstander, as a propulsion plant watch officer, which is the lead watch station in one of the two main propulsion plants. And then I was also a division officer for primary fluid systems for the number 2 reactor plant.
Well, that's impressive. You know your stuff. And then you got wind of this program. How did that happen? Or these experimentation programs?
Well, there had been a couple of folks that had voiced some concerns. This is one of those things where it's, the program itself is intended for an offensive use. So this is something that could be used, say, like on North Korean scientists. We know that the people there, they're developing a nuclear weapon, and if they want to make one of those scientists seem unfit or crazy or to cause, infighting among that group, that might be a legal use of this technology. But some of the people who are sworn into it had made a couple statements that, maybe this technology is getting out to people who shouldn't have it. So I guess an example here, recently Ronan Farrow published an article in The New Yorker titled Harvey Weinstein and His Army of Spies. So that kind of gives an example of, who might get access to this program.
I saw that, David. I saw that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, through an illegal channel. So say Harvey Weinstein is worth, whatever, hundreds of millions of dollars. He's able to, provide big donations directly to campaigns, and then also bolster up political action committees. And I think those have unlimited donations. And so through that political process, there's some corruption, and people are able to get access to people who are on I guess you call them contractors, people who, it's kind of like a revolving door. They'll go in and serve in, the military. And then once they're done with their time in the military, if they worked in intelligence, they might get a job at FBI, NSA, CIA, working with some of this equipment, in that application. Okay, we're going to go against the North Korean scientists, which is legal in the context of protecting the country. And then they go to say, in that article, they talked about that Harvey Weinstein had used a intermediary, this attorney David Boies, who served on, I guess it was Al Gore's contested 2000 election. He did the arguments before the Supreme Court. And what they do is they use the attorney-client privilege to hire a lawyer, and the lawyer will go out and then hire ex-spies. And that article listed, I think, 3 different private investigative firms. So they bill themselves as corporate. I don't know. It's not corporate espionage. Let's call it corporate fact finding for various law firms. So that the idea being that they're going to go and do opposition research for the lawyer to determine if any claims are valid. But what they really do is they're just doing the same sort of spycraft they did when they were in the military. So
right,
they get access to this technology. We've seen some of it with the story about the U.S. diplomats in Cuba, where they're suffering some mysterious illness. That is this same technology. The symptoms I've heard described in those stories are a little bit more, I guess, sanitized for the mass media consumption. But I guess it was August 8th, they started publicizing that something like 15 to 20 U.S. diplomats were suffering the same sort of physical symptoms that TIs experience. And they said it had been going on for over a year, and they were just now come to light. They had been told to kind of keep quiet from the State Department, but the news got to the press somehow, or they announced it. So say a guy like Harvey Weinstein would be able to use Black Cube, PS Ops, and I think the other one was it was made up primarily of former Mossad agents, which is the Israeli intelligence arm. And so you got guys that are, they have a military career, they go into intelligence, and then they work as contractors. And in that case, just for the one actress, Rose McGowan, they said that they had found an invoice for $600,000 plus I think another $150,000 in incentivized payments if they met certain goals, with $100,000 being confirmed to have been paid through that law firm to that that group of Israeli ex-spies. And they actually found one of the operatives. They were able to corroborate that this operative who presented herself to the actress Rose McGowan as like a feminist or women's rights activist who was actually an Israeli spy. Other organizations like ABC, NBC, PBS were able to find that operative was working in other cases for opposition research, and in the U.S. they were able to publish her face, show her trying to get information on a different case, and sort of corroborate the information. So that the information is out there. It's just a matter of kind of educating the public and pointing them in which direction to start tackling the subject.
Yeah, this has just become a really big issue on so many levels. You know, these tactics are kind of being spread around, and they're just the most serious of bullying tactics that have probably existed. Some of these programs and some of the technology and the tactics, these COINTEL tactics and this harassment that they do is just you know, it's out of control, and it can get worse, you know, because now this is other people other than, you know, the deep state with terrorists. They, you know, some of this stuff started even then, and then, you know, that we had this, you know, people being experimented upon. But now it's, you know, this is getting in the hands of the public and the criminal society, and you know, and I have always been very suspicious of these security companies, you know, with all these security clearance, the security clearances that they have and have obtained in the past from their previous work in military. So that was a very relevant bit of information there. And then, of course, we have talked in the past about Lisa Remini. I hope I've said
it's actually Leah Remini.
Remini, thank you.
Yeah, she was the lead actress for the CBS sitcom King of Queens that ran in the 2000s. Very popular show. She's back on the air with the same actor in a show called Kevin Can Wait. But she also has a separate project called Scientology and the Aftermath, which absolutely describes how organized intimidation stalking works and has both former perpetrators and the victims explaining how the process worked. So there was in the Scientology, they have something called the Flag Organization, which is kind of the administrative organization that runs that church. And there was a guy named Mike Rinder who was the international spokesman for the Church of Scientology for a number of years. And there are 2 episodes in which he describes how he would go about organized stalking. Episode 2 of season 1 is titled Fair Game, which is the Scientologists' version of organized intimidation stalking. And then episode 9 brings in several other victims, and it's titled Merchants of Fear. So those 2 episodes are available on demand on A&E as well as Amazon Prime. I've heard it's coming to Netflix as well. But most people, when I talk about this topic, they instantly understand it if you discuss Leah Remini, because they seem to like her, but also it's just so much the amount of evidence that they bring in those episodes with those 4 or 5 guests, and then the fact that those stories were talked about on a national level and they went through the court process and were confirmed to have happened. It's such a great example for TIs to reference when discussing the topic.
Definitely so. And I know recently you attended a conference in the Boston area on these topics, you know, with victims of these type of crimes. And how did that go?
Well, it's very, very difficult to get TIs together because if you've seen Leah Remini's show, the attack that TIs experience is absolutely overwhelming. Most of the time they're left without a job. You know, they've caused friction within the family. There's a kind of a famous scene in that show between the current, or I guess it was the most recent Scientology spokesman, Tommy Davis, and then a reporter, I think it's John Coleman of BBC Panorama, where they had been working on this guy and harassing him at his house, you know, on the street, and they get him to blow up on camera. And so that's kind of, and then what they do is they try to portray the person as insane. And really the guy is just a BBC reporter that's been tasked to find out if there's any sort of abuse within the Church of Scientology and investigate claims of, physical beatings that were occurring. And in order to discredit and keep that story from running, they have an entire set of tactics they use to just basically bring the guy, bull bait the guy until they kind of make a fool of themselves in public. And so TIs, that will happen within their family. So they're often left isolated. So this recent conference was great. I guess they had, I don't know, between 50 and 100 people showed up, cycled throughout the day. And that was great because I've been to a few previous get-togethers, and it's, usually, handful, 6, a dozen. This is probably one of the bigger turnouts we've had as a community. And, this story, the information is out there. It's just a matter of getting the right people who are a little bit, I guess, media trained would be the term. The folks that would we be able to get in front of a, television camera that would be able to use a little bit of discretion or who had, good knowledge of the topic so that we could get the information out to the public. Because we have such a hard time explaining the issue because it's kind of complex and it's using technology that folks aren't even aware that it exists yet. Most people don't know that prosthetic limbs now have the ability to connect wirelessly with the body's nervous system and provide tactile feedback. So that kind of concept is not widespread knowledge yet.
So that's kind of the human-machine interfacing aspect that you're discussing.
Yeah. So there's a couple of different stories. There's a guy named Miguel Nicolelis out of Duke University. He was kind of the preeminent scientist out of Brazil. And before the 2014 World Cup soccer match, they brought together 150 scientists and engineers and built an exoskeleton for a guy who had been paralyzed in a motorcycle accident. And through that process...
Hold on just a second, David. It looks like we're going to go to station break, and we'll be right back with David Voigts and Matthew.
You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Well, hello and welcome back to Whistleblower Nation. Again, I'm Ella Free, and I'm here with David Voigts. He's a former naval officer and graduate of the United States Naval Academy. And so let's get back. I'm going to just turn it back over to you, and we'll pick up where we left off.
Yeah, I think we kind of covered the basic things that I talk about. Usually with the organized stalking, I'll cover Leah Remini's show. And then the electronic stuff, the great thing is the story about the U.S. diplomats in Cuba. That's kind of huge for TIs. For the longest time, they had been labeled as paranoids or delusional, and you can't really do that anymore when you've got State Department people who have been checked out medically and have found to have issues from being attacked with microwaves. So that would be kind of a next step for TIs is to, kind of follow up on who examined these folks, and then we'll need to get, the same sort of testing through those groups to validate our claims.
Yeah, I see. And, I know you had one of the most popular, actually you and Dr. Matthew, and as well as Dr. Sean Andrews. I understand the three of you had just an amazing presentation there. Did you cover basic information? Did you discuss any of the, what's curious to me, and I'm not even sure because I know you're very clear if you don't know an area and you'll just state that that's not your area or topic, how some of this electronic technology works, some of this interfacing that goes on, because I think that's very fascinating.
Yeah, there's a couple of different theories on it, but I guess the way I look at it, and the way I hope TIs look at it is, well, maybe we shouldn't have that information. I think after 2000, they had, after 9/11, they had one of these idiots in one of the weapons lab got a hold of some anthrax. And he I don't know what reason he had, but he started mailing boxes of anthrax to people. And, that's the sort of thing, the military does have, viruses and bacterias, but all of those things are on a banned weapons list. We aren't supposed to be using them offensively, and they're to be, the only reason we're supposed to have them is, to kind of study them and to have a sort of defensive scheme looked up or set up in a scenario where, if those viruses or bacteria or anthrax or toxins like that were to get out, how would you treat that medically? So I would think that, STIs, maybe we would be satisfied knowing that, okay, the government admits that these weapons exist. We have the diplomats in Cuba that have been able to be believed when they brought their, allegations forward, and they were able to receive some medical treatment. So as TIs, maybe we don't ever get to know the exact way the military system works, but we would be able to kind of see how the new prosthetic limbs work. We're able to, cure paralysis or help people with MS or ALS achieve some sort of, improved function, from the same sort of technology, but kind of keep the, where the military is a little bit ahead of where the general public is, just for security purposes, national defense purposes. But there's a couple of different theories. One of them is that it's a microwave-based, completely wireless system. And then the other one is that they use some sort of medical nanotechnology, or they're able to understand how the structures within the body work and interface directly with the microwave signal.
Okay. And what do you think some of the delivery methods might be, possibly?
I would guess it would be like an over-the-horizon radar or a satellite-based system. But with these programs, you are clearly into counterintelligence. So whatever your belief in the system would be, you would constantly get people who would undermine, whatever your belief system is, provide a lot of disinformation to confuse the situation. And the thing we got to understand is, this is a multi-billion-dollar. If you think about like the cell phone network, how much does it cost to put up an entire network of cell phone towers and maintain that system? You're talking about a worldwide, like a Department of Defense system, like the global positioning system that's completely and totally classified to the point that they've got the public believing that it doesn't exist. So it's really not something that we would be able to pursue as a small group of victims, but it's something that we certainly can document it and then get medical treatment, I think, in the long term. And then I think once more of the technology comes online, like we see in Facebook, they have an initiative to do human machine interface to help type on Facebook. It's supposed to be brain right out of the brain and then onto the screen, which is already an available technology through systems like the Emotive Epoch, which uses an EEG system to take brain information. Or Elon Musk is doing a company called Neuralink, which is basically the TI's same sort of technology. He wants to create what he's calling a neural lace that will interface with I don't know the exact science that he's describing, but it's basically a mechanical intermediary that would allow the body's bioelectrical information to interface, basically to the internet or a brain net to transfer thoughts directly to a computer-based system. So it's basically artificial telepathy.
Right. Yeah. And we know that a lot of this technology can be used for good, but we know it can be used for other. And anything that can be used for good can also be used for bad.
And this, right now we've got a situation where yes, we can cure paralysis and give people that have lost feeling or sensation in their body through ALS, MS, the ability to have sensation, but it's also we have the ability to torture people remotely
or even influence people.
Like or without them ever knowing. Yeah.
Influencing voting patterns. I sometimes wonder because, it's transmitted, who knows how, but, and you're sitting in front of a computer, we don't know. I mean, I'm only speculating, but the possibility is if that technology is advanced.
Tremendous.
Yeah, it's tremendous.
If you look at any weapon system, you think of like a missile system or a fighter jet or a submarine. How much money goes into those programs. What we're talking about here is the ability to read people's minds, control their physical movements, influence them indirectly, and it's very, very advanced. You can go online and look at things like Jack Gallant's video. He's a professor at the University of California at Berkeley. He shows you exactly how they do mind reading. And he's been on Morgan Freeman's show. You can just get on the internet and search Jack Gallant fMRI mind reading, and there are about, half a dozen or a dozen videos that show you exactly how they do that by indirectly measuring blood flow to determine brain activity, because it takes oxygen to fire a neuron. It takes oxygen and glucose to make a neuron fire, and with today's modern technology, through blood flow, they're able to create kind of a sort of a topographical map, and then use that information to get useful information about what's going on in the brain.
Right. So, yeah, that's a lot to digest. So, in another word, a word I don't use and I don't like it, is kind of like mind control. That's a word and terminology that people know, but it's not exactly the true. So, I prefer.
Well, no, I kind of like it that I guess you talked about the church committee hearings before I had gotten on tonight, and I kind of like mind control. They're calling it what it was, and then I guess in the 80s, they had said that the MK Ultra program had stopped, and they started calling it psychotronics again, which is kind of a mashup of electronic
I don't like that
psychology.
Word. Yeah.
It's kind of what's passe or out of, and then now I think they're calling them perception warfare or spiritual warfare weapons, but there really they're mind control and human machine interface technologies.
Yeah, but it's just hard because so many of those things fall into conspiracy, and I won't even cover conspiracy.
Yeah, for the longest time, I wouldn't even use the word deep state. I was kind of worried that people, but now they're saying it on national television. That use the term.
I know that it's just going to take a little time, David. All this is going to start to filter out. Deep state is common language now. This is just
for the longest time. I was afraid to use that in public conversation.
Yeah, because it sounds conspiratorial, and you and I both we don't go that route. So, that's just real. That's really what it is. And Kevin Shipp is someone who maybe you can listen to some of his videos. He's amazing. He knows a lot about the black ops, the shadow governments, and the deep state. And he speaks it matter-of-factly. And I know MSNBC has discussed it, and they've talked about Bill Binney and all kinds of things that have been.
The Snowden thing was huge. They had Bill Binney and Kirk Wiebe, for the listeners who might know, or whistleblowers back in the 2000s, and it wasn't until Snowden came around that those guys finally got a public voice to say what they had been saying for 10 years prior to the Snowden revelations.
Yeah, I've been trying to get Ellsberg to come on. That's one person I really want. Of course, Snowden would be great, but that's a little difficult. Not that I haven't asked him. I've gone to Twitter. He has private messaging. I've tried about a dozen times. I give up usually after 12 times. So, but there's some great whistleblowers out there I just love to speak to. So, but I appreciate you. You've risked a lot. What does this cost you? And did you lose your job from?
Oh yeah. So I got TI'd. I've been tortured with this technology since January of 2012. And then they came after me at my job. So I've probably lost about $1.5 million in wages. And then, the family friction, have to move back into my local area. And it's just beyond belief, some of the stuff. But I got what I was after. I got the information. I found the group now. And, I've been able to contact people like you. And now there's an opportunity to get these people who are in a situation where they're being experimented on, tortured, in some cases made to go shoot up the Navy Yard or Florida State University. These people, I'm now able to do some advertising and get the word out And just like the Tuskegee experiment, I think eventually, a reporter's going to get it. It's going to click, and they're going to realize, what these people have been saying all along, it's true. And that might be this next year. I'll be doing a public outreach trip this next year, and we've got a new series just dropped on Netflix titled Wormwood that discusses the murder of Frank Olson, and that I think that things like that are now becoming in the public, consciousness. People are becoming aware of it, and eventually the story will break.
Agreed. So Matthew was also there at the conference, and I know he was interested in maybe discussing with you, some ideas. He had some ideas. I know he wanted to discuss them. So who I have with me now is Dr. Matthew Aaron is the name he goes by. He's a neurobiologist, and your other things too. Do you want to give a quick recap of your education and your ability or your jobs?
Well, you might as well just call me by my real name since you outed me.
Okay. His pen name is Aaron, but okay, we'll go by.
YouTube name is Aaron, but
Okay.
I work for the right now, so it's probably a good idea for me not to use my real name for YouTube postings on this topic, just because I'm more effective if I keep my job.
Yes, we agree. And that's a shame to say that, Matthew. And people who have been victims to any kind of harassment, even these women in Hollywood dealing with Weinstein and all these powerful men that do this to women who are, rightfully speaking out about harassment and blackmail and all these different things to people like you and David and myself and people that have to deal with this, these companies that, these people, sick people on us. And mine, I had a very powerful man who's well known and a celebrity. He kind of did a lot of harassment to me as well, and it's been a very horrific experience. So this is some dirty stuff that people across the board are dealing with, from the rich and famous to, a person who's been made homeless. So, it's a topic that's very serious and it's expansive and it's growing. So that's why we speak so much and we have so much concern for the world at large.
Well, I'll tell you what, just to respond briefly, and then I want to ask David some questions, but it is a shame that you have to deal with this situation cautiously like that. But I'll tell you, I have managed to salvage my functional life, even though I was heavily targeted. I even managed to get away from the people that were targeting me, at least in a practical sense. I'm no longer targeted. So being cautious about using my name was part of my well thought out strategy, and I want to be employed. I'm in this for the long haul. But I was interviewed for a Travel Channel show, and I used my real name, and I discussed this situation. I mean, that was the topic of the interview, and so that's coming out. If they use the material, that's going to be on television in March. And I used my real name. I told them I did not want to say anything about my work affiliation because that could get me fired very quickly. So in my office, I have started to tell people about this issue, and I've started to share my YouTube podcasts with coworkers. So I don't want to be the kind of person that hides, but we'll start using after the television interview. I'm going to start using my real name with this issue. But I've been cautious up to this point. I feel sort of ashamed that I had to do that, but it was probably the smart thing. You were the one who actually encouraged me to do that.
Yes,
remember?
Yes, I did. I thought that was the smart thing to do initially, just because this topic is still kind of a topic that people haven't wrapped their heads around yet. They're starting to, but, and I was just concerned, for various reasons. I was looking out for your best interest. So, yeah.
Well, when I was forced to yell for police help in Vancouver, British Columbia, because I was assaulted with what felt like lethal force with electromagnetic device by people who were clearly in pursuit of me, and I had to call for the police. Guess what that got me? That got me promptly thrown into a psychiatric hospital just for calling for police help. So that's the so that's kind of the backdrop of this issue. But anyway, I digress. I'm glad to meet you, David. I've corresponded with you, but I've never spoken with you before. So it's nice to meet you.
Yeah, likewise. I think there's great people in the community. It's just a matter of getting them organized, and that's really all it will take. And some advertising, really.
Yeah.
I've been in. I hate to interrupt between you two gentlemen speaking, but I've been in contact now with a lot of people who have whistleblower organizations, and they don't know about the terms that we use, but they're absolutely going through exactly the same thing as our community is. They just don't know the terminology. They're being harassed. People are breaking into their house because they've told about an oil spill, and so people just don't know the terms. So I'm going to take that opportunity. I'm going to have next week the head of this organization, one of the main organizations for whistleblowers, and he'll share his story, his experience, and how he's protecting whistleblowers. So that's next week. So I'm sorry, gentlemen, I just wanted to bring that up quickly, and I'd like to get you guys communicating once more.
Yeah, Ella, you're spot on there. It's a standard basket of tricks that are used, and they like you said, they'll use it on like an Aaron Brockovich situation.
Yes.
If you like, people like that who don't deal with, they have different. Like you say, there are other groups that are attacked in this exact same way, and they don't think of it as a human-machine interface technology. They think of it as something else, but it's the exact same thing. It's harassment. It's a physical sensations that they're feeling. And those people, I think by getting our issue out in front of the public, those people can also be helped.
Yeah, and the surveillance for me, and for a lot of people, and now it's common knowledge. I can have this discussion with everybody now. I knew about surveillance being an issue, and I knew that the government and other people had that ability too, to hack into systems and surveil through, So I knew about that in California. Yeah.
You just hire somebody to do it.
Yeah. So the surveillance aspect was a big issue for me personally. I just, but then you realize you're like, oh my God, this is possible too. So these are these security agencies doing this, and living in LA, knowing all those kind of people too, they hired and employed these security systems. So I've heard some stories, not realizing that anybody would ever do that towards me. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, Matthew, I know you wanted to ask him some questions.
Well, no, let's carry on. This is interesting. Can you hear me? Let's see.
Yes.
Yeah. I think we have interesting times ahead of us, because the way I look at it is, having gone through this, all three of us are victims of this. In fact, even the producer here, I believe, is a victim of this. And we all know that there's a lot of shame and fear built into this. And so I go with the running assumption that there are a lot of victims who need to be shown the way or the example on coming forward, or they need to feel safe in doing it. And I think there are also other groups, just like you mentioned, David, that don't align themselves with us, but they're facing the same thing. So I think in the near future, we're going to see these things kind of congeal together, and people being sort of bolstered to come forward, emboldened, so to speak.
Yeah.
So there's interesting times.
Yeah, kind of like a Roger Bannister. As soon as people know that, hey, I can come forward, I'm not going to be thrown in the psych ward. If I this is the process. I go to a lawyer and I say these, this basket of things, then I can go make my police report without fear, and I can go talk about this publicly, and I can take out a Facebook advertisement to advertise in the area to ask people for information about my public stalking and public harassment. Once there's kind of a protocol and people know that, hey, for group stalking, you can be charged with conspiracy if you know about the situation and you don't report it. It's not just some simple hazing. This is an effort. The ultimate goal of these situations is to get the person to commit suicide, get them separated from their job, or in the situation we've seen with the Navy Yard, Florida State, or Baton Rouge shooters. That's kind of one of the other goals that they have for the program.
It's a different kind of program, but that's an extreme, example of what can happen with some of these people. But like you mentioned, Dave, it's kind of like this Me Too going on. All these women coming out all of a sudden with sexual harassment, and boy, I've had my share as well. But you hold it, you keep it in, you hide it, But it's typically not ongoing as well. It's just something you kind of just shove in, and you don't talk about it with many people. So all of a sudden, the dam's open, and everybody wants to talk about all these experiences. So, when people start to realize, how much of this harassment's going on by, and even like I speak to a lot of women who have ex-husbands harassing them, trying to make their life miserable to get and this person too,
child custody.
To get child custody, or to get back at an ex who left them, or it's disgusting. A little bit of money buys you a lot of, it's anywhere from 10,000 to 100,000 if you want to completely destroy lives. Or like these people down in Hollywood, with Weinstein. I had heard about that. I had a friend that still, some girls that work down there as well, and she'd mentioned it, and then I heard about that article the other day that he was employing the same type of tactics. Scary. He has the money too. So
they said they had 91 people on his list. That's incredible.
Yeah, it is. And then of course you have the government, the deep state or the government areas that are doing this as well. So that's another issue. People are put on terrorist watch lists, and they become prime targets of working with these tactics and doing this to people. And this is a non-discriminating thing that occurs with people.
Yeah, and so, it is worth noting that from my experience, it's something like 70% women, that are in this program. Those are the people that I talk to in any case.
The victims.
When we say about terrorism, these people are not. They're not terrorists. They're not terrorists. At least not they may have gotten on that list, but they are. It's from what I've seen. It's about 70% women, often people who live alone or who can be easily socially isolated.
And there's a lot of African Americans too, I've noticed. And some of them, it goes back further, some of them experiencing things like this from their family, but I know initially when these type of things started to occur in a smaller context, so it was like Greenpeace and all these and protesters and people like that became victims of the government and their little tactics, the COINTELPRO and all these other things that they
Martin
started to
integrate.
King, exactly. Yep, he was targeted as well, and of course. Who's the other one escaping me? The very strong man.
The one I like is the guy who made OSHA. His name's escaping me. He wrote "Unsafe at Any Speed."
Yeah.
Ralph Nader.
Yeah, Ralph Nader. That's right. You referenced him before. So, I just want a world where these kind of that they don't. It's like people think they're getting justice, whatever that means to themselves, into their own hands, and in doing these and hiring these people to do these type of things to people, and then the government may be perfecting and honing these skills and these technologies, and it is expansive. It's just any criminal elements, and the security agencies are at the top of the list in my opinion. I find them to be always suspect. If you go on to some of these security pages, it is big money. It's huge money.
Yeah, you're talking about government budgets where it's a worldwide system. It's like the GPS system. So there's a fixed amount of money going into that, and then they have contractors working for both the government and for, like we've seen with the that's been in some of the politics, that they'll work for political parties or corporations or big donors like Weinstein. So there's just tremendous amount of money, and when you have state resources, you're talking billions, billions of dollars. So you can find people that will do this for that kind of money.
Yeah, it's just something we do need to worry about, and I sometimes need to focus on these dark matters, and not only just because I'm a victim, and I know people have been victimized. It's just I don't want this to continue on. I don't want my children growing up in that world. There's a lot of things that are really upsetting in the generation that we live in, but we just have to first get this recognized as a real issue, and it is hard to prove, especially when we're dealing with things that can have plausible deniability all the time and are kind of set up to make a person look crazy. But that's not to say that sometimes mentally ill people do fall into the groups.
It's totally okay. If I were running this as a counterintelligence operation, I would make sure that there were a certain number of mentally ill people in it that started out as mentally ill, and then you get them in the group and they kind of self-discredit the group.
The entire group.
Yeah, and that's the entire, that's exactly kind of how they ran the MK Ultra program. Use prisoners, use people who work in the drug trade, sex trade, or people that kind of are on the margins, because they can't fight back.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, one thing I would like to see happen when on the other side of this, and I think it will naturally happen if we ever get to the other side, is that society and the professional societies associated with psychiatry need to take a hard look, because psychiatry failed an acid test on this. And I know it was a hard test, but they failed a test in distinguishing their diagnostic criteria failed in the face of this new technology. And so they're actually, the way they've been dealing with this situation, the ignorance they have towards this, and possibly in some cases, certain people are complicit in facilitating this. Is going to embarrass them big. I mean, my regard for psychiatry is like Dark Ages blood letters at this point.
Yeah, and being on the other side of it, we know that they have some advanced technology that if you could get it into their hands, it would be a much better profession. They would have actual science behind them rather than some social norms that are used to vet out.
That could be how this plays itself out. Is that basically? I believe at this point, I hear rumblings about this through my work, is that there are factions within biomedicine that really want to see biomarkers and evidence-based neurology sort of step in where psychiatry uses an art and opinion, basically. And so this might actually precipitate that shift towards a more evidence-based science of the mind, basically.
Yeah, I agree totally. They're on the cusp of moving into real science.
Hey, I was wondering, can we shift the topic towards, because I'm really curious about your plans that you've made. Sort of what I'm interested in is like how what you learned from your previous activism project of walking and engaging with local communities and newspapers, and what are your plans and how you might improve upon what you learned from your last effort. And can you tell people a little bit about what your plans in that regard?
Yeah. So basically what I do is advertising, and I was for the longest time trying to, I knew a little bit about this topic, and now I've got all the information. And so what I do now is advertising. So I had previously done a cross-country walk to try and raise awareness of this topic. And I was walking, I started out in Delaware and walked to Jefferson City, Missouri, and then I had to come home for some family issues, a series of funerals. And that, I kind of learned how to do that. And, people are interested in that. If you're walking, through some of these smaller towns, a person walking across the country for any social cause, be it heart disease, opioid overdoses, breast cancer, any of those sorts of things, they'll send out a newspaper reporter, or they'll send out, or they're willing to have you come in and do a little radio show, or, I came through here and the local television for Peoria and Columbia, Missouri, and Bridgeport, I think, West Virginia. They'll send out a television reporter to kind of, get your information. It makes it kind of a nice, 2-minute segment. So the biggest thing about doing outreach on this topic is sequence. You have to talk about this topic in the correct sequence. So really, in a television interview, you're getting, max 7-8 minutes, most likely 2 to 3 minutes. So to talk, you don't really get to go too far in depth. So what I usually do is try to reference things like Leah Remini's show, so that if they do get hooked on that, they see the entire full scope of organized stalking. Or you try to reference things like the U.S. diplomats in Cuba, or I think this new series Wormwood on Netflix. Hopefully that'll be a hit, and people will kind of understand the history of the mind control programs. So this next year on April 7th, I'm going to try another cross-country walk. We're going to start out with a 5K or 10K race in Cape Henlopen, Delaware, and try to get some TIs out there, hopefully do some media training ahead of that to ensure that we're all kind of narrowing the scope of what to talk to people who are completely unaware of any of this sort of harassment or this organized stalking, electronic harassment type of revenge and silencing program. And then, we'll kick that off. I'm sure we'll get some media attention there. And then I do a Facebook campaign. So every day I spend, whatever my budget is, 10, 20, 30 bucks, and get that information, get that out to whatever area code I'm walking through, a day or two ahead. And then, I have a, website, Facebook posts, and, a lot of people will follow that along if they're into fitness. Last time I had my dog with me, so some people were just interested in animals. They would, check to see in the pictures with the dog. And some people, are interested in the nature side of it. So the trail I'm going to be walking is called the American Discovery Trail. It's kind of like the Appalachian Trail or Pacific Crest Trail. It goes from coast to coast. It starts in Delaware, and it goes through to California, ends in a beach just north of San Francisco. So it's about 200 walking days. So that kind of put me somewhere in the middle of October into November, finishing up in California. But, it's basically an advertising campaign. So I talk to people, I take pictures, I post raw video, and we'll have people that will edit it into a 30-second or 1-minute little video clip every day. And then I'll probably do some like trailside training and just kind of talk in front of the camera about this topic and post that and onto Facebook. So it's just kind of my way to get a little bit more prominent within the community. And a lot of TIs are very, based on the nature of this, it's a harassment program. They don't always trust other TIs. So, hopefully over the next 7-8 months, I'll people will see me out there, walking thousands of miles for the cause. I'll be able to get a little bit more trust within the community. And then from there, I think it's a matter of getting the group together and kind of getting the topic in front of a camera.
I agree.
Well, you have my trust. I know you have high integrity, and you're doing more tangible activism than the vast majority, if not most other TIs. So you've got my support. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Ella. Go ahead.
Oh, no, that's okay. You kind of covered it.
Yeah. I just wanted to, I wanted to throw a couple of suggestions out there. Just maybe you've thought of them already. First of all, I'll say I'm going to be there in Delaware when you start this thing off. I'll definitely come to that. And I wonder if at the tail end, let me go in sequence. Since there's basically nightly conference calls for victims of this crime, I'm wondering if we can kind of get local groups of people to meet you and walk with you for the segments that go close to their communities.
Yes.
And that can kind of thread the community together, because one thing we need more of is binding the U.S. community together. We're a little bit fragmented. There's a lot of infighting, and we can pick up new members and new victims that way.
Yeah, I never, in the last one, I never went more than, I think, 2 days without a TI coming out to see me. And it's such a huge thing when you're hiking like that. You're walking basically a marathon every day or more, and it's just exhausting. So to have people come out with a car and be able to, pick you up, take you to breakfast, kind of get fueled up, and then, get into a hotel versus in a tent, that's huge. It's incredible, and it's a very physical activity. So it definitely helps in the healing to be able to sleep in a bed versus in a tent. And so, yeah, I'm all for that. Definitely appreciated when people came out and visited for a day or two and walked with me for a little bit on the trail.
That might actually be more Ella's and my and other activist leaders, I guess you could say. I don't think of myself as a leader, but it's going to be our job to kind of keep speaking about this when you can't, because you're out there busy walking. But I basically think that from April to November, this will be a regular talk, and updates on where you are and getting people out there will. In extreme cases, if there's actually like a TI support group in a small town, it could actually lead to like a mini, demonstration, not a negative demonstration, but like a celebratory activism event, basically. And if this builds over time, I wonder if you can stay on your schedule. I wonder if we could schedule the fall conference like we had in October to coincide with your arrival in San Francisco.
I think, Alison Ireland had the lead on that, and I think that's what she was talking about. Now, this ends in San Francisco, and I think most of the TIs are down in the LA area. But, right. It would be certainly within carpool distance, or, we could have a group meet on the beach and then go have the conference afterwards, and, a weekend conference. I'd just hop a rental car or whatever down to LA and do the conference down there.
And you did get quite a bit of press last time. I know you were like on Coast to Coast, and Donna Bohannon, and who's a beautiful woman who just passed away? Oh goodness!
Yeah, she
Joyce Riley.
Based Joyce out of Riley. Missouri. Was on there once, scheduled to go on there a second time. And I think we'll get with the nature of social media these days, and especially with all of the other topics that come up. To be honest, I had 3 or 4 or 5, like you said, you had been on the Travel Channel show. 3 or 4 or 5 people call and talk to me and vet me for a television series. So I'm sure I'll get a documentary filmmaker interested in that, and then we'll probably get a shot on goal for a national news. I would think. They've had this before. Yeah, I think that if. Especially with this hike, it's about a 5,000-mile hike. That's worth 2 minutes or 30 seconds or a minute of national news coverage.
Well, I'll be here for you this year too. I'm going to be with you every single day, harassing you every day.
I couldn't do it. The last time I couldn't do it because literally you're walking 10, 12 hours a day. It just wipes you out. You don't have you don't have the 2 hours to sit down and. Or literally the battery power of your cell phone, to be out in the woods talking to, someone over the cell phone trying to explain this topic to, a radio producer, especially it's certainly not more than one. And sometimes you're talking to 2, 3, and 4 people a day. That's just not possible with the workload. Yeah,
but I was so impressed that so many people were interested, found you credible, were intrigued with the story. Everybody, like 90% of the people were interested in speaking with you when I was making all those calls, but you just didn't have enough time to talk to all of them. So,
and that's where, the piece with having people come out and meet me. If somebody brings a car,
then you can get to where you need to go.
Yeah, the other thing is, there are parts that are entirely covered by like a Lyft or an Uber service where I can say, okay, I'm going to hike from 5 a.m. to 11 a.m. and then I'm going to get in an Uber and go to the radio station, do the interview, and come back and pick up and hike the rest of the day. So that's with rideshare that adds another dimension of flexibility where I'm.
And you would have to go meet them. Sometimes those stations too. We'd find. Not just those stations were difficult to get to. The newspapers.
They want you to go.
You'd have to walk there.
It's not feasible to really walk. 5 miles might take me 2 hours with a big pack on. So.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this time. Go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, I'd like to get your perspective on something, David, and that is reaching out to law enforcement and paramedics. And I'll tell you, this one is. I don't believe that the majority of law enforcement or paramedics are doing this, but I can say with certainty, I won't give you the details, but you'll have to take my word for it, that there were a handful of Vancouver police officers and Vancouver paramedics that directly participated in my harassment each time, moments after I was assaulted with directed energy. And so they were part of that conspiracy to assault me and torture me, basically. And I mean that has really changed, woken me up and changed my view towards law enforcement. And so I struggle with keeping an open mind, because there's a lot of good people out there. And I wonder if you have any advice, or if you can
here. Yeah, I live in Illinois, and Chicago. Like, the people of Chicago understand that there's just corruption there. And we had a famous case of a guy named John Burge that, to help his crime statistics, would go randomly pick people off the street and torture a confession out of them. And so we know that there are these groups of punks within, if you have a population, any large population. So if you've got, half a million law enforcement, you're going to have some fraction of 1%. That, even though that's a small percentage, you can build a network out of that. And that's kind of what we've got here. We've got people that have gone from military to intelligence to contractors. And then, some have spun out into law enforcement, and those guys that, might have done interrogations in Vietnam end up doing this type of, that's exactly what John Burge was. He was a guy that was working in, I think, probably the Phoenix program in Vietnam, and, that training that he got, he's using it incorrectly, in a law enforcement situation. So yeah, there are definitely people that are involved in that, and then if they get a call, everybody knows to direct that specific officer to answer that call. So it's usually a regional thing, and I'm sure that there's one guy in every area that's kind of in charge of doing the law enforcement piece for that. It's just like the down south with the Klan. There was always one or two Ku Klux Klan sheriffs or police officers, and anytime they had an issue dealing with anything related to that, that officer would take that call. And so that's how that violence kind of perpetuates.
Yeah, I relate this to like a high-tech incarnation of the Ku Klux Klan. And I think there's another related factor going on also. It's similar to what you said. I agree with what you said, but I also think that now there's a lot of officers and law enforcement that are kind of in chief of police and management roles, and they say, we cannot touch this issue. It is too hard. There's no forensic evidence. We can't touch this issue. And the problem with that is that when that becomes policy, unwritten policy, non-public policy, then the police officers that want to get themselves recruited into this business for kickbacks, they know that they can do it with impunity. And so that kind of like complete blindness or unwillingness to take this issue on is what kind of is a gateway to corruption. So that's a problem, that this crime is actually a gateway to some very, very destructive behaviors.
So, guys, we have about 5 more minutes. So let's maybe, I think we're already I always like to end on solutions and movements that, how far things have progressed. So any ideas or anything you can do? I always say for people out there, number one, if you are a whistleblower, don't be intimidated. You need to go out and you need to speak the truth. The truth needs to come out. We need a truth movement. And number two, I think speak on topics. Speak on a lot of these topics. If you are interested in the topic we're discussing today, we have a website. It's www.freedomfortargetedindividuals.org. That's me and Matthew's site. And what about you, David? Do you have a site, or I know you have? Do you have? YouTube?
I primarily work out of Facebook. Okay. I did have a WordPress site, but mostly it was just information. It wasn't. Right. I will have one up for the walk, but that's not perfected yet.
And his name is David Voigts, Voigts, and you can find him on Facebook. And then also I have another interview on Ella Free on the Ella Free channel. We have a library of interviews based on the similar topics, and now I'm kind of expanding onto some other whistleblower topics as well, which has been really enjoyable. And Matthew, what about you? What are you working on? What do you have coming on here in the near future? I know you're busy with your editing and you're working hard and you're writing projects. And
I have a writing project, which I've told you before, I'm not willing to talk about until I make it come true, and then I'll talk about it. I'd really, really love to go up to Vancouver and give a talk, give it like a 10-minute speech at this restaurant that allows people to tell true stories on this topic. I think I'd be stalked heavily after I did that, but it would give me great satisfaction. I guess I would just say that we're not going to be able to get justice against all the low-level scumbags that are doing this, but we certainly are not. I'm not going to stop until I see justice for the people that are orchestrating this. And so I have a message to people that have gotten swept up into this, and that is, we are on the winning side. We victims are on the winning side. And so if you still have some of your humanity and some of your sense, save the evidence. When you need to flip, the day is coming soon. You will need to switch sides, and you can help us take some of the people at the top down if you want to reclaim some of your humanity. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Doctor. What about you, David? So you have this walk coming up, and I know that you're busy all the time working as well. So any other projects or anything else or any information you want to share with people?
That's pretty much it. I've got about 100 days to train. We'll be kicking off on April 7th there. And then I'm sure we'll get a couple shots on goal with national news. And I think with a couple of chances at talking about this in the public openly, people will find the information. It will become public.
Right. It's about time. And then what about the current state of politics? I'm always curious. What's your opinion on what's going on in the White House and with the president? And they're kind of shaking up some of the agencies. So I'm just curious what your opinion on that is.
I think we're in a pretty I think this is kind of a good time for TIs. I think that this administration would be much more receptive to just taking the scandal, getting this pushed out there, picking a few fall guys, and then moving forward, getting this on a banned weapons list, and then getting this technology used to help people with paralysis, MS, ALS, people with developmental disabilities, loss of limb, that sort of thing. I think this administration would be interested in doing that rather than dragging this on for another decade and then disclosing. Who knows if it just gets disclosed or not in a future administration.
Do you have a PayPal or anything you want to share? Because I know you work very hard to save up your money and make these trips. Do you have one available yet to help?
Yeah, I have it's the same GoFundMe account. It's linked to my Facebook page. I think it's GoFundMe.com/no-touch-torture. I think it's no-touch-torture. You can search David Voigts on GoFundMe. I think it's called Naval Academy Graduate Walks or Walk Against Human Experiments, something like that.
Okay. And then also, again, we're always trying to raise a little money for our station here. We don't do commercials. We keep it commercial free and special interest free. And this is a very special station, and I have a lot of respect for the producers and all the hosts that are involved, and my personal producer, Mona. I mean, these are just terrific people, and a little bit of money goes a long way, guys. We want to keep these stations going and these type of organizations going, because this is where you're going to find truth, and we can speak on topics we want without having to worry about commercial interest or who the advertisers are. So these are really important type stations. So if you want to make a small donation or become a monthly member, you just head on over to freedomslips.com and click on the donate page. And so I think we have still a couple more minutes. So okay, so David, anything else you want to add? We still have a couple minutes. I kind of closed it up a little bit too early there. We have another minute.
Okay. Yeah. I'll go ahead and we'll talk about the Frank Olson murder. Again, there's a Netflix series. People really love that. There we go. But it's called Wormwood. You can catch that on Netflix.
Wormwood. Okay. Yep. Thank you, David Voigts. Thank you, Dr. Matthew. I appreciate both of you so much. Thank you, Mona. And I'll see you guys next week, same time, same place.
Hey, David, it was great talking to you. We'll see you in April in Delaware.
Looking forward to it. Have a good day.
All right. Thank you, Ella.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mona.
And I saw that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, through an illegal channel. So say Harvey Weinstein is worth whatever hundreds of millions of dollars. He's able to provide big donations directly to campaigns, and then also bolster up political action committees. And I think those have unlimited donations. And so through that political process, there's some corruption, and people are able to get access to people who are on the, I guess you'd call them contractors, people who, it's kind of like a revolving door. They'll go in and serve in, the military, and then once they're done with their time in the military, if they worked in intelligence, they might get a job at FBI, NSA, CIA, working with some of this equipment. In that application, okay, we're going to go against the North Korean scientists, which is legal in the context of protecting the country. And then they go to say, in that article, they talked about that Harvey Weinstein had used a intermediary, this attorney, David Boies, who served on, I guess it was Al Gore's contested 2000 election. He did the arguments before the Supreme Court. And what they do is they use the attorney-client privilege to hire a lawyer, and the lawyer will go out and then hire ex-spies. And that article listed, I think, 3 different private investigative firms. So they bill themselves as corporate. I don't know. It's not corporate espionage. Let's call it corporate fact-finding for various law firms. So that the idea being that they're going to go and do opposition research for the lawyer to determine if any claims are valid. But what they really do is they're just doing the same sort of spycraft they did when they were in the military. So
right,
they get access to this technology. We've seen some of it with the story about the U.S. diplomats in Cuba, where they're suffering some mysterious illness. That is this same technology. The symptoms I've heard described in those stories are a little bit more, I guess, sanitized for the mass media consumption. But I guess it was August 8th, they started publicizing that something like 15 to 20 U.S. diplomats were suffering the same sort of...
I think that their government would be doing something so horrendous, and it's kind of similar. I would take to being on a terrorist watch list. Kind of gives them some leadway into surveilling people and trying different tactics that might work in true terroristic environments. So, what do you think, Matthew?
Have you defined for your callers for your listeners, what we're talking about? Because I wasn't able to listen for the last 10 minutes or so.
All I've been doing is reading. We spent quite a bit of time reaching David, and then we also kept losing the studio.
Oh, I think Dave just joined.
Yes.
Dave. Oh my gosh, it's a miracle. Thank
God.
God.
We're gonna have a bowl.
Oh my goodness, I'm gonna have a celebration here. I'm so glad you could join us, Dave.
Yeah, glad to finally make it through.
Yeah, me too. Okay, so I'm going to read a little bit about Dave. Okay, so I have his bio in front of me. David Voigts is a former naval officer and graduate of the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. He earned a degree in control systems engineering. David worked as a surface warfare officer in electronic warfare and nuclear engineering jobs. While in the service, David learned of an ongoing non-consensual human experiment testing on human-machine interface weapons. The program is testing technologies similar to those used in modern prosthetics. A similar program was revealed in the 70s where a government agency was caught dosing unsuspecting citizens with LSD. The agency never told the human subjects they were in an experiment or checked to see if there were long-term side effects on their lives. That agency was brought before the Congress in the 70s. And that's the church hearings, which I was just talking about earlier when I was discussing some whistleblowers. Since then, many ethical reforms and training have been put in place. At the Naval Academy, there's a substantial character development program. All go through ethics and moral philosophy classes, and there are classes in naval law. The humanities courses include discussions of the Soviet Gulag system, and trainees visit the Holocaust Museum and listen to Holocaust survivors speak. The Tuskegee experiment and atomic radiation experiments are discussed. All in there, there's an extensive effort to ensure that new officers have a strong moral compass. So upon learning that these current non-consensual testings were existing, David began to do outreach campaigns for the victims, and David has been doing this now for a couple of years. And he will again be walking across America starting this spring. So David, thank you again so much for coming in, and I'll try to speak a little quicker since we have a little bit less time. So
this is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all!
See how the trouble you've started?
Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human being. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers.
You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
hello and welcome to Whistleblower Nation here on Revolution Radio. I am your host, Stella Free. I always start with this. What is a whistleblower? A whistleblower is a person who makes public disclosures of wrongdoing, corruption, and crime. These courageous people often suffer retaliatory actions because of their disclosures. Well, I'm here to celebrate these people and give them a platform to speak, because shining a light on wrongdoing, wherever it occurs, plays an important role in keeping society peaceful, free, and just. So if things work out well, we'll have David Voigts back. Unfortunately, last time I tried to have him on, there was some technical issues as well, but this time maybe we'll have a little more luck. And if that doesn't work out, my dear friend and an expert in some of the human experimentation areas, his name is Dr. Matthew Aaron, will be joining us, and maybe the three of us will be speaking. So we'll just see how it goes. So I guess we're going to try and get David in on the call.
All right, we're live on air again, Ella. And do we actually have Matthew?
We have Matthew.
I love you all. Okay, your show is on. Here we go.
Hey, Matthew.
Hello.
Hi. So we were, again, trying to have David Voigts, and you and I both know he has a wonderful presentation and has great information to share with people on the topics of human-machine interfacing and brain-influencing technology and some experimentational programs that go on. And, you know, he worked at the Navy, and I don't know how we're going to get him on board. We're having somebody, this is like the second time. So anyways, but we can talk about similar topics because I know you're a specialist in these areas.
By being a victim of crimes involving similar things, that makes me a specialist?
Well, you know, your ability to research and become involved in getting immersed in these topics for it to have a better understanding and have the verbiage and the ability to communicate effectively with people. You're like, I think you're in the top 4 activists in the community of people that feel like they're being experimented on or targeted or harassed by certain corporations or entities for different various capacities and capabilities. So you're right up there in my book.
Is that an equal playing field in the top 4, or can you give me a rank?
Number 2. You might be number 1.
I'll take that. I'll take number 2.
But number 1, for personal reasons, you're just a wonderful, amazing human being. So you're really number 1. So, but I had to give an unbiased opinion. You know, we have some other people. I thought, well, there might be somebody else that might deserve it, but you know. Anyways.
I was looking forward to talking to David because I had a bunch of ideas for his campaign to walk across the country and bring awareness to this. I was excited about a bunch of ideas and stuff. I was really hoping to talk to him. I've never spoken to him before.
I know. I don't know if we'll be able to get him to connect or not. I mean, she could try one more time, but I don't know. It might screw everything up. What's your thoughts, Mona?
Well, we had this miracle happen.
Be happy for this?
I think for right now, yes.
Okay. Yeah, so, you know, David has gone through great lengths to try to educate the community after being a part of the academy and discovering that there's some experimentation programs similar to the Tuskegee experiments in the 60s, I believe. You probably know about that, Mona. She may have stepped away. And so...
just mute because this is not my show.
Okay.
I'd like to hear what Matthew's up to and what's going on with him because you were boasting about how big his brain was. Pick his brain for a little bit.
I will pick his brain, but I thought maybe you knew about the Tuskegee experiment. So anyway, so yeah, this gentleman, David, is he's tried, you know, he's already walked halfway across America once already and very successfully and was able to obtain a lot of press and try to bring these matters to light. And, you know, it's kind of shocking. You know, people don't want to. Maybe you can start with like what year you were working as a system warfare officer, and what did that entail, and what year was that?
Okay, so I joined the Navy in '97, enlisted and went through the nuclear power program, and then went out to the fleet, served on a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, and applied to the Naval Academy. I was picked up for the Naval Academy in 2000. And I went to the academy from 2001 to 2005 and earned a degree in control systems engineering. And then I became what's called a surface warfare officer. So essentially you're the guy that drives surface ships. You take care of all the administrative work. You're a division officer for a specific warfare area in your initial tour. And during that initial tour, I served as an electronics warfare officer, and I also was a bridge officer and served in the operations department. And then I went through the nuclear power program again in Charleston, South Carolina, and then served on the John C. Stennis, which is a Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. And I served as a watchstander, as a propulsion plant watch officer, which is the lead watch station in one of the two main propulsion plants. And then I was also a division officer for primary fluid systems for the number 2 reactor plant.
Well, that's impressive. You know your stuff. And then you got wind of this program. How did that happen? Or these experimentation programs?
Well, there had been a couple of folks that had voiced some concerns. This is one of those things where it's, you know, the program itself is intended for an offensive use. So this is something that could be used, say, like on North Korean scientists. You know, we know that the people there are, you know, they're developing a nuclear weapon, and if they want to make one of those scientists seem unfit or crazy or to cause, you know, infighting among that group, that might be a legal use of this technology. But some of the people who are sworn into it had made a couple statements that, you know, maybe this technology is getting out to people who shouldn't have it. So I guess an example here, recently Ronan Farrow published an article in The New Yorker titled Harvey Weinstein and His Army of Spies. So that kind of gives an example of, you know, who might get access to this program.
I saw that, David.